The immense, sleek profile of the Alora's Wrath carved a silhouette against the distant stars, its midnight purple hull absorbing, rather than reflecting, the faint illumination of a dying red giant on the sector's edge. The warship's crimson plasma circuits pulsed beneath translucent hull panels, giving the vessel the appearance of a predator with blood coursing visibly through its veins. On the command bridge, Lieutenant Mara Therese stood at her tactical station, slender fingers dancing across holographic controls as she monitored the sector's activity. The soft, violet glow of her console cast sharp shadows across her angular features, highlighting the ridge of cartilage that crowned Elorian foreheads, an evolutionary remnant of their apex predator origins. "Contact at bearing 73 Mark 12, she announced, her voice carrying the clipped, precise tones of Elorian military training. "Faint distress beacon, sir. Appears to be a mining vessel." Admiral Vashel Dren turned from the vast view screen dominating the bridge's forward section. His weathered face, scored with ritual scarifications denoting his century of military service, broke into a predatory smile that revealed twin rows of pointed incisors. "Mining vessel, you say?" Dren's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Identify registry and composition." Lieutenant Therese frowned, adjusting sensor parameters. "Registry. Unclear, sir. Interference patterns suggest an older Triarch Union design, possibly modified. Minimal shielding. Life support functioning at reduced capacity." Around them, the bridge hummed with the efficient movements of the Elorian crew. Science Officer Corral, her skin the pale lavender of Elorians raised in the outer colonies, bent over her station's scanner. "Mineral content analysis suggests they've been harvesting tritanium from the asteroid belt in Sector 419, Corral reported. "Considerable payload aboard." Security Chief Yulene, a hulking figure whose ceremonial combat scars covered nearly every visible centimeter of skin, grunted approvingly. "Slaves and salvage in one convenient package." Admiral Dren settled back into his command chair, its obsidian surface shimmering with inlaid circuitry. "Set intercept course. Standard intimidation approach." His voice lowered to a purr. "No sense damaging potential merchandise." Lieutenant Therese acknowledged the order with a curt nod, though something about the mining vessel's energy signature troubled her. As she programmed the intercept trajectory, she ran a supplementary scan, searching for anomalies. The Elora's Wrath glided forward, its massive engines pulsing with barely contained plasma. Throughout the ship, 3,000 Elorian crew members moved with practiced precision, preparing for what they assumed would be a routine raid. The Coalition had dominated this sector for decades. Their technological superiority, particularly their advanced plasma shields and energy cannons, ensuring their unchallenged supremacy. As they closed within 10,000 kilometers, Lieutenant Therese's console emitted a soft, discordant tone. Her brow furrowed as she examined the readings. "Admiral," she said, voice tightening with sudden concern, "I'm detecting unusual power fluctuations from the vessel. The signature doesn't match any known mining configuration." Dren waved a dismissive hand. "Primitive miners are known to cobble together whatever technology they can salvage. Their patchwork modifications are of no consequence." "Sir," Therese persisted, her military discipline battling with growing unease, "these readings suggest energy containment systems far beyond mining requirements. I recommend we approach with—" "Lieutenant," Dren cut her off, eyes narrowing. "Are you suggesting this derelict poses a threat to the flagship of the Elorian Coalition? A vessel that has conquered 3 star systems without suffering so much as a shield variance?" Around them, several bridge officers stiffened, sensing the dangerous edge in their commander's voice. Therese swallowed, knowing the career implications of challenging Dren's authority. "No, sir. Merely exercising standard caution." "Good," Dren smiled thinly. "Now, bring us alongside and prepare boarding parties." The Elora's Wrath surged forward, its massive form dwarfing the distant speck of the mining vessel. As they closed to 5,000 kilometers, the bridge view screen magnified the target, a battered, cylindrical craft with the characteristic pitted hull of vessels that spent decades navigating asteroid fields. Mining equipment extended from its ventral surface like primitive appendages. Lieutenant Therese was halfway through boarding party assignments when her console erupted with warning indicators. The mining vessel's energy signature had spiked dramatically. "Admiral!" she called out, voice sharp with alarm. "Massive power surge!" Before she could complete her sentence, the mining ship shimmered, its appearance wavering like a mirage before dissolving entirely. In its place stood a vessel of distinctly different configuration, sleek, purposeful, and bristling with unfamiliar weapon systems. Its hull gleamed a stark, clinical white, accented with blue running lights, twice the length of any human vessel previously encountered by Elorian scouts. The bridge of the Elora's Wrath fell into stunned silence. For many, including Admiral Dren, this was their first direct glimpse of a human warship of this class, and the reality was far more imposing than intelligence reports had suggested. "Tactical analysis," Dren barked, rising from his command chair. Therese fought to keep her voice steady as she reported. "Configuration matches United Earth Confederation designs. Designation: Resolute-class dreadnought. Multiple weapon emplacements. Nature unknown. No visible shield generators." She paused, confusion evident. "Sir, they've had us in weapons range for several minutes, but have made no hostile moves." As if in response to her observation, a communication request flashed on the main view screen. Admiral Dren hesitated momentarily before nodding sharply to his communications officer. The screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the human vessel. Unlike the dark, atmospheric lighting of Elorian ships, the human command center was brightly illuminated, with clean lines and minimal ornamentation. At its center stood a woman in a crisp, white uniform adorned with silver insignia, her dark hair pulled back in a severe style that emphasized sharp, intelligent eyes. "This is Captain Elena Maris of the United Earth Confederation vessel Resolute," she stated, her voice calm and measured. "You have entered protected space. Your vessel has been identified as the Elorian warship Elora's Wrath, responsible for multiple violations of sovereign territory and attacks on civilian craft. You will power down weapon systems and halt your approach immediately." Admiral Dren's expression shifted from momentary surprise to contemptuous amusement. He straightened to his full height, towering over most of his bridge crew. "This is Admiral Vashel Dren of the Elorian Coalition of Worlds. You are the trespasser here, human. This sector falls under Elorian protection by right of conquest. Your vessel's stealth capabilities are impressive," he conceded. "But they will not save you from destruction should you persist in this insolence." On the view screen, Captain Maris remained impassive. "Admiral Dren, I'll not debate territorial claims with you. Our intelligence indicates your vessel was preparing to attack what you believed was an unarmed mining ship. Such predatory behavior is precisely why the UEC has established a presence in this region." Behind Captain Maris, Lieutenant Therese could see a dark-skinned human male working intently at what appeared to be a science station. His fingers moved with methodical precision as he analyzed data scrolling across his display. "Captain," the man said without looking up, "I've completed my scan of their vessel. Their primary shield generators operate on a frequency modulation of 3.7 terahertz. Engine manifold exhibits the standard vulnerabilities of Cerethos pattern plasma containment. The casual revelation of detailed knowledge about Elorian defensive systems sent a wave of unease through the bridge. Science Officer Corral frantically checked her own readings, confirming with visible distress that the human vessel had indeed penetrated their security protocols. Admiral Dren's face darkened with rage. "Your spycraft will be reduced to atoms. Human. No one threatens an Elorian warship with impunity." He slashed a hand toward Therese. "Target their propulsion systems. Full plasma barrage." Lieutenant Therese hesitated fractionally before complying, her tactical training warring with the mounting evidence that they might be severely outmatched. She engaged targeting systems, watching as crimson reticles locked onto the human vessel's engine section. Before she could complete the firing sequence, the Resolute fired first, a single, concentrated pulse that wasn't visible until it impacted the Elora's Wrath's engine, manifold in a flash of blue-white energy. The Elorian vessel shuddered violently, bridge lighting flickering as alarms wailed throughout the ship. "Report!" Dren roared, gripping his command chair as the deck stabilized beneath them. "Engine power at 0!" Corral's voice was high with panic. "Containment field stable, but all propulsion systems are offline. It's as if they've induced a harmonic resonance in our power matrix." "No hull breach," Therese added, scanning damage reports with growing disbelief. "No casualties. They've just disabled our engines with surgical precision." Admiral Dren's face contorted with fury. "Fire plasma cannons now!" Therese completed the firing sequence. The ship trembled as massive plasma emitters along its lateral hull discharged superheated energy toward the Resolute. The bridge crew watched, expectant, as the devastating weapons, capable of reducing planetary installations to slag, streaked toward the human vessel. The plasma bolts reached the Resolute and passed through it, as if the ship weren't there at all, continuing into empty space before dissipating harmlessly. For a moment, the Aelorian bridge crew could only stare in stunned silence. "Impossible," whispered Science Officer Corral. "Direct hits registered, but sensors indicate the energy was somehow absorbed into a buffer field we can't detect." The communication link with the Resolute remained active. Captain Maris watched them with the calm assessment of a seasoned commander. "Your plasma-based weapons are ineffective against our barrier field technology. Admiral, I suggest you reconsider your options." Lieutenant Therese frantically recalibrated targeting systems, searching for any weakness in the human vessel's defenses. Her console flashed with error messages as the Elorian technology failed to lock onto anything substantial. "Admiral," she said, voice dropping to ensure only Dren could hear, "we should consider diplomatic options. Their technology clearly surpasses our current." "Silence!" Dren hissed. "The Elorian coalition does not surrender. Reroute emergency power to secondary weapons. Prepare boarding craft." Security Chief Yulin stepped forward, eager for close-quarters combat where Elorian physical superiority might still prevail. "My warriors stand ready, Admiral." On the view screen, Captain Maris seemed to anticipate their intentions. She nodded to someone off-screen, and the Resolute fired again, not a single pulse this time, but a series of precisely targeted quantum torpedoes that streaked toward the Elora's Wrath in a coordinated pattern. The first impact sent cascading failures through the Aelorian vessel's primary energy grid. Bridge lighting dimmed to emergency levels. Weapons consoles blinked into darkness, and the constant thrum of power that permeated Elorian ships fell suddenly, ominously silent. The second torpedo struck moments later, targeting the ship's primary targeting arrays. Across the vessel, weapons operators watched helplessly as their control systems went dark, leaving the mighty Elorian cannons effectively blind. The third impact was a pinpoint strike against the aft sensor suite, plunging the Elora's Wrath into a sensory blackout. External cameras failed, leaving the view screen showing only the last captured image of the Resolute, frozen like an ominous portent. Through it all, hull integrity remained intact. Not a single Elorian life had been lost, but the flagship of their fleet had been rendered deaf, blind, and powerless in the span of 30 seconds. In the eerie silence that followed, Security Chief Yulin was the first to speak. "Admiral," she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued, "I recommend immediate surrender. We cannot fight what we cannot see or target." Admiral Dren's hands gripped the arms of his command chair, claws extending involuntarily to gouge the polished surface. His face, illuminated only by the dim red glow of emergency lighting, was a mask of conflicting emotions, rage warring with the first stirrings of fear. Lieutenant Therese studied her tactical display, now operating on minimal backup power. What she saw sent ice through her veins. "Admiral," she whispered, "sensors are detecting additional signatures emerging from stealth configuration. Multiple UEC vessels surrounding our position." As if to confirm her report, the view screen flickered back to life, apparently permitted by the humans, to show the space around them, where there had been only a single human warship moments before. Now, a dozen vessels of varying configurations had appeared, arranged in a precise formation that placed the Alora's Wrath at its center. Beyond them, long-range sensors detected distortions consistent with an even larger fleet holding position just beyond direct visual range. Captain Maris's face reappeared on the communication channel. "Admiral Dren, what you're witnessing is a small fraction of the United Earth Confederation's Task Force Sentinel. We've been monitoring Elorian expansion into this sector for months, documenting your attacks on civilian vessels and unauthorized mining operations." She leaned forward slightly, her expression hardening. "This ends today. The UEC will not tolerate predatory behavior that threatens human colonies or our allies. You will withdraw your forces to Elora Prime immediately. Any further aggressive action will result in the complete destruction of the Alora's Wrath and any supporting Elorian vessels." The bridge erupted in chaos. Junior officers turned to their superiors for guidance. Veterans who had served through multiple campaigns exchanged glances, heavy with the realization that they faced an enemy beyond their capabilities. Admiral Dren rose from his chair, towering over the command deck. "Emergency warp protocols! Get us out of here!" Engineering teams scrambled to comply. But moments later, the Resolute fired again, 3 precise strikes in rapid succession that left the Elorian communication array, shield generators, and final operational plasma cannon in ruins. The bridge lurched as power systems fluctuated wildly. When the deck stabilized, a deathly silence fell over the command crew. Through the view screen, they could see the Resolute maintaining position, its weapons arrays still oriented toward the Elorian vessel's most vulnerable points. Lieutenant Therese moved to Admiral Dren's side, speaking low enough that only he could hear. "Sir, we have no options remaining. Our crew is alive only because they've chosen not to kill us. For the sake of the 3,000 Elorians aboard, I urge you to stand down." For a long moment, Dren remained rigid, his face a battlefield of pride and pragmatism. Then, almost imperceptibly, his shoulders slumped. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Open emergency communication channels." Therese quickly established a rudimentary link using backup systems. Admiral Dren faced the view screen, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. "Captain Maris," he said, each word seeming to physically pain him. "The Elora's Wrath stands down. We yield." The human captain nodded once, her expression neither triumphant nor gloating, merely the satisfied acknowledgement of a necessary task completed. "A wise decision. Admiral, engineering teams from the Resolute will provide sufficient power to maintain essential life support on your vessel. You will be permitted to limp home, carrying a message to your High Council." At her gesture, the view screen shifted to show a recording, the entire encounter from the human perspective, including the revelation of their hidden fleet. The message was unmistakable. This was not a lucky ambush, but a carefully orchestrated demonstration of overwhelming superiority. "Humanity will not tolerate predation," Captain Maris continued. "We offer friendship and fair trade to those who respect our sovereignty. Any future aggression will be met with total annihilation." The communication terminated, leaving the bridge in silence, broken only by the occasional alert from failing systems. Lieutenant Therese moved quietly among the stunned crew, organizing them to tend to minor injuries and stabilize critical systems. Throughout it all, her mind replayed the encounter, analyzing the implications of such advanced human technology and their strategic approach to confrontation. Admiral Dren remained in his command chair, staring at the frozen image of the human fleet on the view screen, his expression vacant as the foundations of his worldview crumbled around him. 3 weeks later, the Alora's Wrath limped into the space dock, orbiting Elora Prime, its once proud silhouette now scarred and darkened from power failures. News of the encounter had preceded them, carried by faster courier vessels, and the grand citadel of the High Council of 12 was already in an uproar. Admiral Dren stood before the semicircular dais, where the council members perched on obsidian thrones, their elaborate ceremonial armor glinting in the pale light filtering through crystal viewports. Lieutenant Therese stood several paces behind him, summoned as a witness to the unprecedented defeat. The center of the chamber floor displayed a holographic replay of the encounter, the stealth reveal, the surgical strikes, the emergence of the human fleet. Council members watched with expressions ranging from outrage to poorly concealed fear. "A single human warship," Dren testified, his voice hollow, "supported by a dozen more, rendered the Alora's Wrath helpless without killing a single crew member above a minor corridor breach. Their weapons passed through our shields as if they were not there. They disabled our engines, our weapons, and our communications before we could mount an effective response." Councillor Vrek, his ancient face a map of battle scars from the early conquest era, leaned forward. "You speak of impossible technologies. Admiral, no species possesses the capability to penetrate our plasma shields without detection." "With respect, Councillor," Dren replied, "the evidence before you suggests otherwise." "Then you propose what?" demanded Councillor Morith, her voice sharp with accusation. "That we cower before these humans? That we abandon territories rightfully claimed through blood and conquest?" The chamber erupted in heated debate. Half the council advocated immediate mobilization of the entire Elorian armada, a devastating force that had subjugated dozens of worlds. The other half urged caution, pointing to the recording that showed how effortlessly the humans had neutralized their flagship. Lieutenant Therese stood silently, watching the political machinations unfold. When the council finally called upon her for testimony, she stepped forward, acutely aware of the weight of her words. "Honored Council," she began, measuring her tone carefully, "I witnessed the entire engagement. The humans demonstrated not only technological superiority, but also strategic restraint. They could have destroyed us at any moment, yet they chose precision over annihilation." She paused, gathering courage. "I believe this indicates they prefer diplomacy to extinction, ours or theirs. They've shown us exactly how far they surpass our capabilities. But they've also left the door open to peaceful coexistence." The chamber fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled leaders. For centuries, the Aelorian coalition had expanded through force, treating other species as either subjects to be conquered or resources to be exploited. The concept of meeting a civilization that could effortlessly defeat them, yet chose not to eradicate them, was alien to their worldview. After hours of contentious debate, the Council voted 7-5 to dispatch diplomatic envoys to the United Earth Confederation rather than immediately mobilizing for war. The deciding factor came when Admiral Dren asked for his final military assessment, simply stated, "If we attack, we die, all of us." 2 months later, Lieutenant, now Fleet Advisor, Mara Therese, stood on the observation deck of a diplomatic transport bound for Earth. Behind her, Elora Prime receded into the distance, its rust-colored continents shrinking to abstract patterns against blue oceans. She had volunteered for this mission, recognizing that the encounter with the Resolute had changed everything for her people. The Elorian coalition stood at a crossroads: adapt to a universe where they were not the apex predators, or cling to their beliefs and face extinction. Admiral Dren had retired, officially for health reasons, though rumors suggested he spent his days in seclusion, haunted by the memory of helplessness as his mighty warship drifted powerless. His last words to Therese had been a quote from an ancient Elorian philosopher. "The most dangerous predator carries a gentle word." As stars streaked past the viewport, Therese contemplated the humans she would soon meet. Their technology had humbled the Elorian fleet, yet their restraint had possibly saved millions of lives on both sides. She wondered what other surprises awaited in the diplomatic exchange. What other assumptions about her species' place in the cosmos would be challenged. The Elorian delegation carried with them assessments, treaty proposals, and formal diplomatic credentials. But Therese knew the most important cargo was less tangible: a newfound caution, a willingness to listen rather than conquer, and the recognition that strength could manifest in ways beyond brute force. She rested her hand against the transparent aluminum of the viewport, watching as the transport prepared for its first warp jump toward Earth. To adaptation, she murmured to herself, and survival. The ship hummed around her as it accelerated into faster-than-light travel, carrying representatives of a predator species toward their first genuine diplomatic engagement, a journey from conquest to coexistence, prompted by their first glimpse of a human warship. Admiral Vashel Dren stood rigid in the medical bay of the Alora's Wrath, watching as physicians tended to injured crew members. The casualties were remarkably few: minor injuries from system overloads and a single corridor breach that had resulted in non-fatal decompression before emergency bulkheads sealed. Not a single death. This fact troubled him more than any devastating loss would have. The humans had demonstrated not just the ability to destroy his vessel, but the precision to disable it without bloodshed. It was a form of power more absolute than any he had encountered in his century of military service. "Admiral," Chief Medical Officer Seren approached, her tone respectful but wary. "All injuries are stabilized. No critical cases." Dren nodded silently, his gaze distant. Throughout his career, he had ordered the destruction of dozens of vessels, overseen planetary bombardments, executed rebellious subject species. The Elorian way was absolute: victory through overwhelming force, mercy viewed as weakness. Yet these humans had shown him mercy, and in doing so, demonstrated a strength that made his own philosophy seem primitive by comparison. "The human assistance teams have restored partial power to decks 3 through 17, Seren continued, studying him with professional concern. "Life support is stable throughout the vessel." Another humiliation. Enemy engineers walking his ship's corridors, repairing systems their weapons had so precisely disabled. Dren's claws extended involuntarily, scratching the metallic surface of a nearby equipment stand. "They want us to survive," he said, the realization dawning with painful clarity. "They want us to return home, broken and humbled, to spread fear of their capabilities." Seren's expression remained carefully neutral. "Perhaps, Admiral. Or perhaps they simply prefer not to kill when they don't have to." The notion was so foreign to Elorian military doctrine that Dren almost laughed. Instead, he turned away from the medical bay, striding toward his private quarters where he could contemplate this defeat without witnesses to his shame. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Lieutenant Therese oversaw the coordination of repair efforts. Human engineers from the Resolute had transported across minimal equipment to restore essential systems, working efficiently alongside bewildered Elorian technicians. The lead human engineer, a stocky woman with silver-streaked hair and practical coveralls, approached Therese with a diagnostic tablet. "We've stabilized your secondary power grid," she explained, her tone professional rather than condescending. "Your life support will hold until you reach Elorian space. Navigation and communication systems are online at minimal capacity." Therese studied the human carefully, searching for signs of gloating or triumph. She found none, only the focused competence of someone completing an assigned task. "Why this mercy?" Therese asked quietly, ensuring their conversation wouldn't be overheard by other crew members. Your vessel could have destroyed us with minimal risk. The engineer glanced up from her tablet, eyes betraying momentary surprise at the direct question. That's not our way, Lieutenant. The UEC doesn't believe in unnecessary casualties. She paused, considering her next words carefully. Captain Maris requested I convey something to you personally. She said you showed wisdom in urging restraint, and that such wisdom will be needed in the days ahead. Before Therese could respond, the engineer returned to her team, issuing directions for final system checks before departure. The message lingered in Therese's mind, along with the realization that the humans had been monitoring internal communications aboard the Elorian vessel, another demonstration of their technological superiority. Hours later, as the human teams prepared to withdraw, Captain Maris made a final transmission to the Elora's Wrath. This time, her message was directed to the entire crew, rather than just Admiral Dren. You will be able to achieve sufficient speed to reach your nearest outpost within 2 weeks, she explained, her image crisp despite the damaged communication systems. We've left you detailed specifications of regions now under UEC protection. These boundaries are non-negotiable, but beyond them, we have no territorial ambitions. She paused, her expression softening slightly. We know your society values strength above all. Remember this encounter as you define what strength means. The United Earth Confederation hopes for peaceful relations, but we are prepared for any alternative. The choice is yours. As the transmission ended, Therese caught glimpses of other bridge officers exchanging uneasy glances. The humans had violated every expectation, defied every assumption about how conquerors should behave. They had defeated the Elorians utterly, then helped them survive. It was a concept that would shake Elorian culture to its foundations. The journey back to Elorian space was arduous. With engines operating at bare minimum capacity, the mighty warship crawled through the void like a wounded animal. Admiral Dren appeared on the bridge only rarely, issuing terse commands before retreating to isolation. The burden of managing the crippled vessel fell increasingly to Lieutenant Therese and other senior officers. During one quiet shift, Science Officer Corral approached Therese's station, her voice lowered to avoid being overheard. I've been analyzing the scan data from the human weapons, she said, displaying a complex energy pattern on her tablet. Their gravitational pulse technology operates on principles we've never even theorized, and the barrier field that absorbed our plasma cannons. She shook her head in disbelief. It's as if they're manipulating fundamental physics in ways our science hasn't conceived. Therese studied the readouts, feeling a mixture of professional admiration and existential dread. Could we replicate these technologies? Corral's lavender skin paled slightly. Not for decades, at minimum. Their scientific understanding appears to be generations ahead of ours. The implications settled heavily on Therese's shoulders. The Elorian coalition had expanded for centuries on the assumption of their technological superiority. Entire strategies, political structures, and cultural beliefs were built upon this foundation. What would become of their society if that assumption was shattered? As they limped toward home, Therese found herself increasingly drawn to the ship's archive room, studying historical records of Elorian first contact with other species. A pattern emerged that she had never before questioned. Initial encounters marked by demonstrations of force, followed by subjugation or extermination. The Elorian way had always been to strike first, establishing dominance before any dialogue could occur. The humans had inverted this pattern. They had revealed themselves only after demonstrating their complete tactical superiority, then immediately offered terms for peaceful coexistence. It was a first contact protocol designed not to intimidate through cruelty, but to prevent conflict by removing any doubt about the outcome. By the time the Elora's Wrath reached the outskirts of Elorian space, Lieutenant Therese had compiled extensive reports on the encounter, complete with tactical analyses and recommendations for the High Council. Her conclusions were controversial, advocating for fundamental reconsideration of Elorian expansion policy and immediate diplomatic engagement with the United Earth Confederation. Admiral Dren, upon reviewing her report, had stared at her with unreadable eyes. "You realize this will be seen as capitulation by many on the Council." "I realize it will be seen as survival, Admiral," she had replied steadily. "The alternative is extinction." He had nodded slowly, the gesture carrying the weight of a military career built on assumptions now proven false. "I will support your recommendations, Lieutenant. The Elorian coalition must evolve, or perish." Now, as the crippled warship was guided into spacedock by tug vessels, news of their encounter with the humans had spread throughout the Elorian hierarchy. The High Council chamber awaited, and with it, a reckoning that would determine the future of their species. The grand citadel of Elora Prime dominated the capital city's skyline, its twisted spires of iridescent metal reflecting the rust-colored sunlight in constantly shifting patterns. Built upon the apex of an ancient shield volcano, the structure had been designed to intimidate, a physical manifestation of Elorian dominance. Within its central chamber, Admiral Dren faced the assembled council members, their elevated dais arranged in a semicircle that forced supplicants to continually turn to address different counselors. Another subtle assertion of power. The holographic replay of the encounter with the Resolute rotated slowly above the chamber floor, casting alternating shadows and illumination across the gathered dignitaries and military observers. "This human vessel," intoned Counselor Threll, his voice crackling with age and suspicion, "penetrated our border defenses without detection." "Yes, Counselor," Dren confirmed, his posture military straight despite the exhaustion evident in his features. "Their stealth technology rendered them invisible until they chose to reveal themselves." "And they could have destroyed your vessel at any time?" This from Counselor Reck, whose family lineage included 3 generations of fleet admirals. "Without question," Dren's voice remained steady despite the admission. "Their weapons penetrated our shields as if they were non-existent. Their targeting precision allowed them to disable critical systems without causing a single fatality." The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations, council members conferring with military advisors positioned behind their thrones. Above them, the holographic display shifted to show the moment when the human fleet had revealed itself. 12 vessels appearing simultaneously from stealth configuration, with sensor readings indicating an even larger force beyond visual range. Counselor Morith rose from her throne, her ceremonial armor clattering with symbolic trophies from conquered worlds. "Admiral Dren, are we to understand you advocate surrender to these humans? That you would have us abandon territories rightfully claimed through Elorian blood?" Dren's jaw tightened. "I advocate survival, Counselor. The humans have demonstrated technology that renders our military strategy obsolete. They could have annihilated my vessel, your flagship, and chosen not to. Perhaps they lack the resolve for total warfare," suggested Counselor Zav, a notorious hawk whose planetary bombardment strategies had subdued 3 rebellious worlds. "Mercy is weakness. We should mobilize the Armada immediately, strike before they expect retaliation." At this, Lieutenant Therese stepped forward, despite protocol requiring she speak only when directly addressed. "Counselor, with respect, that assessment contradicts the evidence before you." All eyes turned to her, some curious, others openly hostile at her breach of protocol. Counselor Morith's expression darkened. "You forget your place, Lieutenant." "I remember my duty," Therese replied steadily. "To provide accurate tactical assessment regardless of political considerations." Admiral Dren nodded slightly, granting her permission to continue. Therese straightened, addressing the entire council. "The humans demonstrated not weakness, but calculated restraint," she explained, gesturing toward the holographic display. They disabled our vessel with surgical precision while having the capacity for total destruction. This indicates both technological superiority and strategic sophistication. She tapped her wrist device, and the hologram shifted to display her tactical analysis. Their gravitational weapons, barrier fields, and stealth technology operate on principles our science has barely theorized. More importantly, their approach to conflict appears fundamentally different from ours. Meaning what? Precisely? Demanded Counselor Reck, leaning forward with narrowed eyes. Meaning, Counselor, that where we would annihilate to demonstrate power, they disabled to demonstrate restraint. Where we would conquer, they established boundaries and offered coexistence. Therese paused, gauging the impact of her words before continuing. I believe they are showing us two possible futures: peaceful diplomatic engagement or inevitable military defeat. The chamber fell silent as her assessment settled over the assembled leaders. For centuries, the Elorian coalition had expanded through force, treating other species as either subjects to be conquered or resources to be exploited. The concept of meeting a civilization that could effortlessly defeat them, yet chose not to eradicate them, was alien to their worldview. Counselor Threll broke the silence, his ancient voice barely carrying across the chamber. What evidence do we have that these humans will honor diplomatic agreements? Perhaps this is merely a delaying tactic while they position more forces. Lieutenant Therese had anticipated this question. They provided detailed specifications of regions they consider protected. Counselor, our long-range reconnaissance confirms they have established listening posts and automated defenses exactly at these boundaries. No further, no less. They appear to be precisely who they claim to be. And who is that? Asked Counselor Morth, skepticism evident in her tone. Admiral Dren answered, before Therese could respond. A species that prefers not to kill, unless necessary. One that values precision over brute force. Restraint over dominance. His voice hardened. And one that could end our civilization if we force them to. The debate raged for hours. Military strategists presented hypothetical countermeasures against human technology, most requiring decades of research. Economic advisors calculated the impact of redirecting expansion away from human-protected sectors. Political factions formed and dissolved as the implications became clearer. The era of unchallenged Elorian dominance had ended. After exhaustive deliberation, the Council voted 7-5 to dispatch diplomatic envoys to the United Earth Confederation, rather than immediately mobilizing for war. The deciding factor came when Admiral Dren asked for his final military assessment, simply stated, "If we attack, we die, all of us." As the chamber began to empty, Counselor Morth approached Lieutenant Therese, studying her with calculating eyes. Your assessment swayed several votes today, Lieutenant. Some might consider that ambitious. Therese met her gaze steadily. My assessment was based on direct observation and tactical analysis. Counselor, the survival of our species outweighs any personal ambition. Morth's mouth twisted in what might have been grudging respect. The coalition requires diplomats who understand human capabilities. Someone who has seen them firsthand. Therese realized what was being offered and commanded. I would be honored to serve the coalition in any capacity required. Counselor. Good. Report to the diplomatic corps tomorrow. You'll lead the advance team to Earth. Morth turned away, then paused. Tell me, Lieutenant, what is your assessment of these humans? Not as warriors, but as potential allies. The question surprised Therese, coming from one of the Council's most notorious advocates for military expansion. She considered her answer carefully. They are unlike any species we've encountered. Counselor, they value effectiveness over intimidation, precision over raw power. They could have destroyed us and chose restraint instead. She paused. I believe they would make more valuable allies than subjects, Morth's expression remained unreadable. An interesting perspective. Ensure your diplomatic team includes cultural specialists, along with military observers. We need to understand not just their technology, but their thinking. With that, she departed, leaving Therese to contemplate the gravity of her new assignment. The first official diplomatic mission to Earth would shape relations between their species for generations to come. Across the chamber, Admiral Dren watched the exchange with a complex mixture of emotions. His career had been built on Elorian military supremacy, a foundation now revealed to be sand rather than stone. Yet, there was an odd sense of relief in confronting this new reality, in acknowledging that the universe was larger and more complex than Elorian doctrine had allowed. As the council chamber emptied, he approached Therese, his ceremonial armor seeming to weigh heavier than usual on his frame. "You handled that well, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "The diplomatic assignment is appropriate. You understand what we face better than most." Therese inclined her head respectfully. "I learned from observing the humans, Admiral. Their approach to power. It challenges everything we've been taught." Dren gave a short, humorless laugh. "Indeed. My entire career was built on assumptions they disproved in 30 seconds. He paused, studying her with unexpected intensity. "Learn from them, Therese. Bring back not just treaties, but understanding. The coalition must evolve now, or we will not survive the century." "What will you do, Admiral?" she asked, noting the finality in his tone. His gaze drifted to the now empty council thrones. "I've submitted my resignation. The next phase of our history requires leaders without the encumbrances of past victories." The admission clearly cost him, yet there was dignity in his acceptance of changed circumstances. Therese felt a new respect for her former commander. "Your experience will be valuable in the transition," she offered. Dren shook his head. "Perhaps. But first, I need to understand what we've encountered." He gestured toward the hologram, still displaying the human fleet. "Study them, Therese. Not just their weapons, but their choices. There is wisdom there that our culture has forgotten, if we ever possessed it." With that, he departed, his steps echoing through the grand chamber. Therese remained, watching the holographic recreation of the Resolute as it executed its precisely calculated strikes against the Alora's wrath. In that moment of technological disparity, she recognized not just a military defeat, but a philosophical challenge, one that would reshape her civilization's understanding of its place in the cosmos. 2 months later, Fleet Advisor Mara Therese stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Alora's Wisdom, watching as her homeworld receded into the distance. The ship, hastily redesigned from a military cruiser to present a less threatening profile, carried a delegation of 12 Alorian representatives, including military observers, scientific specialists, and cultural analysts. Therese had been appointed lead diplomatic liaison, a position that recognized both her first-hand experience with humans and her demonstrated willingness to reconsider Alorian assumptions. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her career advancement had come through defeat rather than victory. As stars streaked past the viewport, she contemplated the humans she would soon meet. Their technology had humbled the Alorian fleet, yet their restraint had possibly saved millions of lives on both sides. She wondered what other surprises awaited in the diplomatic exchange. What other assumptions about her species' place in the cosmos would be challenged. Security Chief Yulene approached, her massive frame casting a shadow across the observation deck. Since the encounter with the Resolute, Yulene had become one of Therese's strongest allies, her warrior's perspective evolving to recognize the strategic value of restraint. "The delegation is assembled in the conference room," Yulene reported. "They await your briefing on human customs and diplomatic protocols." Therese nodded, gathering her thoughts. The past weeks had been filled with intensive study of all available information on human civilization, their governance structures, cultural variations, historical development. The picture that emerged was of a species that had evolved through internal conflict to value cooperation, one that had nearly destroyed itself before learning the wisdom of restraint. "Tell them I'll join shortly," she replied, taking a final moment to observe the stars. The Aelorian delegation carried with them assessments, treaty proposals, and formal diplomatic credentials. But Therese knew the most important cargo was less tangible: a newfound caution, a willingness to listen rather than conquer, and the recognition that strength could manifest in ways beyond brute force. She rested her hand against the transparent aluminum of the viewport, watching as the transport prepared for its first warp jump toward Earth. "To adaptation," she murmured to herself, "and survival." The ship hummed around her as it accelerated into faster-than-light travel, carrying representatives of a predator species toward their first genuine diplomatic engagement, a journey from conquest to coexistence, prompted by their first glimpse of a human warship. Halfway to Earth, the Aelora's wisdom encountered an unexpected transmission, a tight beam communication directed specifically to their vessel, despite being in warp transit, a technological feat that further demonstrated human capabilities. The message was simple: a human escort vessel would rendezvous with them at the edge of Sol system to guide them through UEC security perimeters. The implied message was clear: even their diplomatic approach was being monitored from vast distances. When they dropped out of warp at the designated coordinates, the human escort was already waiting, a sleek vessel bearing the designation UEC Diplomatic Corps, rather than military markings. Its design emphasized speed over armament, though Therese suspected it contained defensive capabilities far beyond its apparent configuration. A communication request came through immediately, and the Aelorian bridge crew transferred it to the main view screen. The face that appeared was not Captain Maris, but a silver-haired human male with dark skin and a formal uniform adorned with subtle insignia. "This is Ambassador Thomas Reyes of the United Earth Confederation," he greeted them, his expression professional but not unwelcoming. "On behalf of the UEC Council, I welcome the representatives of the Aelorian Coalition to human space." Therese stepped forward, having rehearsed the formal response countless times. "Ambassador Reyes, I am Fleet Advisor Mara Therese, appointed envoy of the High Council of Aelora Prime. We come seeking peaceful dialogue and mutual understanding." The human's expression warmed slightly. "Fleet Advisor Therese, your reputation precedes you. Captain Maris spoke highly of your judgment during the encounter with the Resolute." The casual revelation that her actions had been not only observed, but discussed among human leadership sent a momentary chill through Therese. She maintained her diplomatic composure with effort. "Captain Maris demonstrated admirable restraint and tactical precision," she replied carefully. "The High Council hopes to establish relations that preclude any need for further military demonstrations." Ambassador Reyes nodded, apparently satisfied with her response. "My vessel will escort you to Earth. We've prepared appropriate accommodations for your delegation, accounting for Aelorian atmospheric and gravitational preferences." Such consideration for their biological needs was another unexpected gesture, one that contradicted centuries of Aelorian assumptions about lesser species and their capabilities. Therese found herself continually reevaluating her expectations as the journey continued. The approach to Earth itself proved revelatory. Unlike Aelora Prime, with its sparse orbital infrastructure focused primarily on military installations, Earth was surrounded by a complex network of habitats, docking facilities, research stations, and defensive platforms. The scale of human civilization in their home system dwarfed anything the reconnaissance reports had suggested. Ambassador Reyes provided a running commentary as they navigated the outer system checkpoints. "The Saturn shipyards to your starboard were our first major off-world construction project," he explained, indicating massive structures nestled among the gas giant's rings. The lunar colonies to port house approximately 12 million citizens, with another 8 million distributed throughout the asteroid belt installations. The casual revelation of human population distribution, tens of millions living permanently off-world, suggested a level of technological development and social organization far beyond Elorian achievements. Therese made careful mental notes, aware that this guided tour was as much a demonstration of capabilities as it was a welcoming gesture. As they approached Earth itself, the blue-green planet dominated the view screen, partially obscured by elegant orbital structures that regulated planetary access. Unlike the aggressive profile of Elorian military stations, these platforms featured sweeping organic designs that seemed to complement rather than dominate the natural beauty below. Your delegation will be received at the UEC Diplomatic Center in Geneva, Ambassador Reyes informed them as they prepared for atmospheric descent. Representatives from our council await your arrival. Therese studied the approaching landmass through the viewport, noting the harmonious integration of urban development with natural landscapes, another stark contrast to Elorian design philosophy, which emphasized dominance over environment. These humans shaped their surroundings with remarkable restraint, preserving natural features even as they built sophisticated infrastructure. The diplomatic transport settled gently onto a landing pad surrounded by snow-capped mountains and crystalline lakes. As Therese led her delegation down the exit ramp, she was struck by Earth's atmosphere, richer in oxygen than Elora Prime, with a subtle sweetness that their environmental specialists had attempted to prepare them for, but couldn't quite replicate. A small reception committee awaited them, headed by Ambassador Reyes and several other humans in formal attire. Beyond them stood a familiar figure, Captain Elena Maris, now wearing a diplomatic uniform rather than military dress, her expression neutral but watchful. Therese approached, performing the formal Elorian greeting, right hand extended, palm upward in a gesture that historically offered an enemy the opportunity to examine for concealed weapons. Ambassador Reyes responded with a human handshake, modified slightly to accommodate Elorian physiology. "Fleet Advisor Therese," he said, "welcome to Earth. The UEC Council looks forward to establishing a framework for peaceful relations between our civilizations." As the formal introductions continued, Therese found her attention drawn to Captain Maris, who stood slightly apart from the main diplomatic contingent. When the initial greetings concluded, Maris approached her directly. "Fleet Advisor," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I'm pleased to see you in this capacity." Therese studied the human who had so thoroughly demonstrated the limitations of Elorian military power. Up close, without the distortion of viewscreen communications, Maris appeared simultaneously more ordinary and more formidable, a living embodiment of human capability. "Captain Maris," Therese replied carefully, "your demonstration aboard the Resolute has prompted significant reconsideration of Elorian policy." A subtle smile touched the captain's lips. "That was the intention, Fleet Advisor. War between our species would be unnecessarily costly." The understatement hung between them, a tacit acknowledgement that such a conflict would have ended with Elorian extinction. Yet, there was no gloating in Maris's tone, only professional satisfaction at a crisis averted. "The High Council has authorized me to negotiate preliminary territorial boundaries and non-aggression protocols," Therese offered, keeping her voice low enough that only Maris could hear. "But I suspect your leadership will propose more comprehensive agreements." Maris nodded slightly. "The UEC believes in building relationships, not just enforcing boundaries. You'll find our proposals extensive." Before Therese could respond, Ambassador Reyes gestured toward the diplomatic center's entrance. "If you'll follow me, we've prepared an orientation session to acquaint your delegation with Earth customs and diplomatic protocols." As they processed toward the impressive structure, a graceful composition of transparent materials and living botanical elements. Therese felt the weight of her responsibility settle more firmly on her shoulders. She wasn't just negotiating territorial concessions. She was helping to chart an entirely new course for Elorian civilization. The humans had revealed not just superior technology, but a fundamentally different approach to interstellar relations. Their preference for precise demonstration over wholesale destruction, for boundaries rather than subjugation, challenged everything the Elorian coalition had built its expansion upon. Entering the diplomatic center, Therese stole a final glance at the sky above Earth, a different shade of blue than her homeworld. Yet suddenly, the center of a shifting cosmic order. The Elorians had believed themselves apex predators of the galaxy, only to discover they were merely one species among many, neither supreme nor invincible. Their first glimpse of a human warship had frozen the Alora's wrath in space. Now, Therese hoped, their first glimpse of human diplomacy would forge a path forward, one that transformed a predator species into something more complex, more adaptable, and ultimately more enduring. As the doors of the diplomatic center closed behind them, she straightened her posture and prepared to help her people navigate their most important first contact, not the moment of military confrontation that had already passed, but this moment of genuine communication that would determine whether they thrived or merely survived in a universe suddenly much larger and more complex than they had ever imagined.